Welcome into a Cleveland Browns mailbag show here at the channel. Today's show was recorded, like all of our mailbag shows, during our live show every Thursday at 4 o'clock Eastern. So if you have a question, tune in next Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, to get on screen and have your question answered. We got a lot of questions to rummage through, to roam through, and let's start with this, a super chat from Soul Train. How important is it to fix the front seven defensively? Very important. If you think about what Andrew Berry has prioritized in the draft, it's been secondary, right? First round pick to Greg Newsome, second round pick to Grant Delpit. Like his first overall selection in last year's draft, a corner. He clearly values cornerbacks very high, and it has come at a price because the front seven outside of Myles Garrett and JOK has been either injured or it's just Myles Garrett. So it's crucial for the Browns to address this issue this offseason. Unlike last offseason when Andrew Berry was like, I'm banking on Jordan Elliott and Tommy Togiai taking a step forward and Taven Bryan being like a Malik Jackson or Malik McDowell and Perrion Winfrey being an impact rookie. Which of those four things happened? The Perrion Winfrey part did, but just for the last month and a half of the season. Joshua Miller next up. Trade Denzel Ward for DeAndre Hopkins straight up. I think the Cardinals say no, right? The Cardinals, if they're trading Hopkins, they want to get picks. They want to reset a little bit. They want to get cheap and young and whatnot. They don't want to take on a $100 million Denzel Ward contract. They're not a $100 million cornerback away from running away with the NFC West. Whereas a team like the Cowboys, for example, I think that's a spot where they go, we have Trayvon Diggs. This defense is already top tier. We're already a playoff team. Can we package Diggs and Ward, right? Now, for D-Hop, I think he goes for a second rounder. So if you really want D-Hop, I don't think you have to give up Denzel Ward. So I think the Cardinals would pass on this before the Browns even get a chance to, counter-offer them. McLovin, next up on the show. What's the difference between Flores' defense and Schwartz's defense? Very good question. So, like I said, we are filming this during our live show on Thursday. So, if you're watching this, if things have changed on the DC front, bear with me. But let's assume nothing has. Let's start with Brian Flores. Brian Flores runs a 3-4 defense. That means 3 down linemen and 2 off-ball linebackers and 2 outside linebackers. So, Myles Garrett most likely is not going to be in a 3-point stance, right? He's going to be in a 1 or 2 point stance off the edge, which is going to result in him dropping back into coverage at times. Also, Flores, he loves to blitz, something Joe Woods did not do a whole lot of. So you can expect a lot of blitz packages, some Greg Williams right there, some Dr. Heat moments where you're like, we're getting after the quarterback. Third thing, strong run-stopping sets. This was something he instilled very quickly in Miami that, hey, Dolphins' run defense is booty cheeks, and we're going to change that immediately. So you can expect a boost on the run defensive front. Now, as for Jim Schwartz, he runs a 4-3 defense. That's what the Browns currently run out of, right? 2 defensive ends, 2 defensive tackles, 3 linebackers. Man heavy in coverage here, which I like to see. I don't get why you use top picks like Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome and Martin Emerson to have them sit in zones. That defeats the whole purpose, in my opinion, of a first-round cornerback. Let him get up to man-to-man. Let him get to the receiver at the line of scrimmage, jam them for a second so that the routes get stalled out and the defensive line can get to the quarterback. Now, he also, Jim Schwartz, is a big fan of letting pass rushers get isolated and getting the best out of them. When Jim Schwartz is a head coach or a defensive coordinator, statistically speaking, his pass rushers have their best seasons of their career. Ndamukong Suh had 10 sacks in 2010, a career high. Who was his coach? Schwartz. Marcel Darius in 2014, 10 sacks, career high. Mario Williams, 14.5 sacks. Also in 2014 in Buffalo. Who was their DC? You guessed it, Jim Schwartz. More recently, Fletcher Cox, 10.5 sacks. Talking about an interior defensive tackle, popping off for 10.5 sacks. In Tennessee, where he has not been the DC, but he's been a senior analyst, Danico Autry and Jeffrey Simmons, those guys are getting paid. Why? Because they had their best season statistically ever under Jim Schwartz. Now, if you had to pick a defensive coordinator, who would it be? Brian Flores or Jim Schwartz? Let me know in the comments section below. For me, I'm happy with either one. Why? Because they're an upgrade from Joe Woods. And that's what I cared the most about, was you need to find someone better. And they have done that. Both of these guys are better. Little Beam next up on the show. What free agent do you hope to God the Browns will go get? Daron Payne. Who's the Washington defense? Daron Payne. And then that first-round pick out of Daron Payne. Yeah, Daron Payne, 11.5 sacks this year with Myles Garrett would be awesome. Will Andrew Berry do it? Probably not. He's not going to go from one end of the spectrum to the other. He went from signing Taven Bryan for like 1 year, $5 million, to giving Daron Payne 5 year, $70, $80 million. That's way too big of a jump for him. So if it's not Daron Payne, I like the idea of bringing Draymond Jones home, right? Cleveland native, and played for the Broncos. He's had some good years the last couple of years, Buckeye. So Draymond Jones would be a fun one. Other defensive tackles. If the Titans reset, Danico Autry would be a fun one. There's definitely some big names out there if Danico Autry gets cut. So, yeah, those are some names I would love to see Cleveland sign. Ryan Chowdhury next up on the show. Would you rather spend big bucks at defensive tackle and draft a receiver, or spend big bucks at wide receiver and draft a defensive tackle? Very good question. This year's receivers class is not as stacked as it was last year. Last year, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Drake London, those were some dudes. This year, they're good, don't get me wrong. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston, but like last year was better. Now, the defensive tackle class this year is really top-heavy. You got Brian Brees from Clemson. You got some guys who are going to go early in round one. There's kind of a drop-off after that. So, for that reason, I would pick the sign Daron Payne and draft a slot receiver like Josh Downs. That would be a pretty good combination compared to signing Mecole Hardman and drafting Siaka Ika out of Baylor. Now, we got more questions to answer in just a moment, but there's a great deal over at Fanatics waiting for you all. This dope Browns hoodie is on sale right now, 25% off when you go to chatsports.com/BrownsHood. Now, I've got that link for you guys in the comments and the description of today's show, so check them out. Get this really cool Browns hoodie on sale today. Won't last forever. We got a question coming in from Alex Hatfield. What wide receiver would you love to see in Cleveland? Good question. I'm going to go right. I'll open up to trade and free agency. There's really no good free agent receivers. I've spoken at length about Hardman before, so I won't talk your ear off anymore on that name. In terms of trade, I don't think DeAndre Hopkins actually does what you're looking for. You're looking for a slot receiver. You're looking for a speedy guy. Patrick, do you have any ideas of a speedy slot receiver that could be on the market right now?
Scotty Miller.
Scotty Miller? No, he's okay. I'll pencil me in for someone like, what about like a Zay Jones from Jacksonville? What if DeAndre Hopkins goes to Jacksonville and Zay Jones gets flipped for like a fifth or something? How about that? That's a pretty random thing I just thought of on the spot right now. Alex, thank you very much for the question. Now, if you hate the Pittsburgh Steelers, subscribe for good company. It's F-Pit channel here. We hate the Steelers. We hate the Squealers. So if you're in that same camp as us, well, make sure to join the channel by clicking onto that subscribe button. Next question coming in from Chef Ruben, a $5 super chat. I've seen much of Schwartz when he was the head coach of the Lions back in the day. I'm from Northwest Ohio. I wouldn't be disappointed if we got Schwartz. I agree that, hey, and maybe when you're watching this, we already know who the Browns DC is, so I sound kind of dumb right now. But if it's Brian Flores, awesome. I would love Brian Flores. I have my tiny concerns over that 3-4 defense and the personnel not matching that right now, but he's still a defensive mastermind. Schwartz, he's great too. We're talking about a Super Bowl winning defensive coordinator for the Eagles. We're talking about a guy that made the Lions competent. That's not easy to do. We're talking about a guy who made the Bills, well, only one season, but he got a lot out of his pass rushers, right? So if it's Jim Schwartz, I'd be very excited about that as well. Brian Flores probably has a slight edge over it just because I think he is a little bit more hitting his peak as a coach, if you will. But both of them, great hires in my book. Brown Tiger next up on the show. I know it's a ways away, but who would you take at number 2 draft pick or trade back again? So the Browns are currently slated to pick 43rd overall in the second round of the draft. And it's very dependent on what they do in free agency. I was actually doing a mock draft, and I did trade back. And maybe Andrew Berry does trade back again. I'm not quite sure what was going on in the war room in Berea last year. If their top guy got taken and they felt it's wise to move back with Houston right now. I'm always a big fan of trading back. If I'm not trading back, I'm taking the best player available, and best player available around that spot. Man, Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt, those guys are tempting. There's a decent drop-off in defensive tackles. Wouldn't mind another edge rusher. I don't know if we saw enough from Alex Wright in year 1, just year 1, but enough to go, yep, that can be a nice partner for Myles Garrett. So I think I'd trade back if I'm Cleveland, if your top guy is gone and you can move back 10 spots and pick up a 3rd-round pick in next year's draft. Soul Train with a super chat. What nose tackle can they get for a 3-4 defense? That's a very good question, Soul Train. So, Daron Payne is not your stereotypical nose tackle. This is a crazy idea. What about Vita Vea? What if the Bucs are a 1st-round playoff exit this year? Tom Brady leaves. He goes to Vegas or he retires or something. And Tampa Bay looks to do a hard reset. And you know it's not a part of a rebuilding team? A big nose tackle, right? Vita Vea would be fun. In terms of free agency, trying to think, Shy Tuttle for the Saints. He's going to get you closer to that. He's a lot cheaper. Javon Hargrave for the Eagles. Not really a true nose tackle. So if I'm going true nose tackle, I don't know. Maybe I'm going to throw out the idea of trading for Vita Vea. Last question coming in from Ben the Brownie. Any good Browns trade candidates? We're hitting all the big ones right now. Draft, free agency, trade. So when it comes to a trade candidate, I'm thinking of a team that's in a spot like the Cowboys last year that maybe cat gets out of the bag of, hey, we're planning on releasing this guy. The cap hit is just too high. And you can fleece us, right? You can rob us at gunpoint like the Browns did, only a 5th-round pick for Amari Cooper and a 6th-round pick swap. What about DeForest Buckner? So I bring up DeForest Buckner because the Colts are looking to do a hard reset this year. They might trade up with the Bears and draft a quarterback 1st overall. Maybe they wait for a guy to fall to them at, 4, 5 overall. But DeForest Buckner has no dead cap hit next season. Maybe they decide our window to win a Super Bowl is not 2023. And if Cleveland wants to give us a 2nd-round pick, listen, fine by me. I would do a 2nd for DeForest Buckner. I know it's always tough to part ways, but you got to think about the hit rate. Look at the 2019, the 2018 NFL draft. Go look at the 2nd round. Tell me how many of those guys are starting. You have a proven starter in DeForest Buckner. Buckner and Garrett, that would be a very, very fun defensive line. So that would be my trade candidate. I appreciate everyone for tuning into today's mailbag. Follow me on Twitter if you haven't already, at Matthew Petey. I'll keep you guys in the loop on the latest Browns offseason news and rumors. We'll sign off, and we'll see you guys later with more Browns coverage.